Ladies and gentlemen, Primetime CP23 here, back with another Diablo 3 video. Today, we're taking a look at another 1000 Death's Breaths per hour build. Today, we're taking a look at the Sun Wuko Wave of Light Monk. This build is very similar to the Wave of Light pushing build that is currently top of the leaderboards. But with a couple very important differences. Number one, we're also using the 6-piece bonus of the Sages set, so that every time we get a Death's Breath, we get an extra one. Now, as for the rest of the gear, we are using the 6-piece bonus for the Monkey King's Garb set. I call it Sun Wuko set, just because that's what the name of the set is Sun Wuko's leggings. But, anyway, so basically for every stack of Sweeping Wind you have, you're going to gain plus 1000% damage on Tempest Rush, Lashing Tail Kick, and most importantly, in this case, Wave of Light. Because Wave of Light is what we're actually using to damage our enemies. So we are using the 6-piece bonus for the Monkey King's Garb set. In addition to Kiroshira's Soul, so that every second we don't damage an enemy, we are gaining 2 stacks of Sweeping Wind. That's how we're maintaining this 10 stacks down here. You see, every, I believe, 3 seconds, 6 seconds, you're supposed to drop all of your stacks of Sweeping Wind, and that's what this little green bar means. But because we have Kiroshira's Soul, it's keeping up our stacks. We're also using Nemesis Bracers so that every time we hit a pylon, we get a free pack. That's more Death's Breaths. We're using an Avarice Band with Boon of the Hoarder in it so that we are also gaining a ridiculous amount of gold. Our other ring is a Convention of Elements with the Bane of the Powerful. So after killing an elite pack, you're going to get 20% damage buff, plus you deal 15% more damage against elites, and you take 15% less damage. Then we're using a Bane of the Trapped in the Sun Wuko Amulet. And then finally for the weapons, we are using Kiroshira's Blade and an Ingeom. In the cube, we've got a Vengeful Wind, which is going to increase the max stacks of Sweeping Wind by 7. This item is basically a 7,000% damage buff. For this build, this item is required. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. It is required. For belt, we're using Gold Wrap, which is going to give us some extra tankiness. Normally, for the pushing variant of this build, we would want to be using Cinder Coat to reduce the resource cost of fire skills. Or possibly Pinto's Pride, which is going to buff the damage of Wave of Light and slow the enemies hit by Wave of Light. But because we're already doing a lot of Wave of Light damage with that 10,000% damage buff we get from the Sun Wuko set plus Vengeful Wind, we don't really need an extra 150% damage, you know? So I'd rather have Gold Wrap, because with Boon of the Hoarder and Avarice Band, you are getting a ridiculous amount of toughness. Just resting, standing still, we're at 40 million toughness. This goes into the trillions when you're in a rift. You're basically unkillable as long as you are killing things. And then, of course, for the jewelry slot in the cube, we have to be using Ring of Royal Grandeur because we are using 2 different sets. And that's pretty much the build. It's a pretty standard build for speed pushing, or rather speed farming. The biggest difference between this and the just pushing variant is number one, because we're speed farming, we are using an Ingeom. Ideally, it would probably be in the cube, but I actually don't have a Vengeful Wind right now. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why. But at this moment, I don't have a Vengeful Wind. So in the cube, we have Vengeful Wind instead of Incense Torch. Incense Torch of the Grand Temple would give us 55 or 550% damage buff on Wave of Light and reduce the spirit cost by 50%. We don't really need it because instead of this 550% damage buff, we're getting a 7,000% damage buff. When you put it like that, it kind of makes sense, right? But yeah, this is fairly unoptimized gear. I've only got 17% cooldown. So basically before I get an Ingeom proc, the build is a little slow until you kill the first elite, and then it just kind of takes off. As for the skills, pretty basic skills. Sweeping Wind with the Inner Storm runes so that we're gaining spirit every time, or all the time that Sweeping Wind is above 3 stacks. So basically that's just a lot of spirit regeneration. We're using Wave of Light with the Explosive Light rune. Mystic Ally with the Air Ally rune, because that gives us a burst of spirit. It gives you 100 spirit when you hit that button. And then Quicksilver, the Quicksilver rune on Dashing Strike, and Epiphany with the Insight rune. If for some reason you find yourself not very tanky, Desert Shroud will make you take more damage. It may be worth it to use that rune on Torment 13. We'll get more into that here in just a minute. But we're using Insight because, again, it's extra spirit regeneration. For passives, this is not right. I don't know why this passive is what's showing. It should be Momentum. It was Momentum in the video that is playing over in that corner. Sorry, mirrors. Cameras are mirrors. Fun fact. Momentum is what's being used in the video being shown. I don't know why it didn't save like that. And I think instead of Harmony, I'm actually using... I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. Harmony's a very good passive. Seize the Initiative is going to increase your attack speed. Probably not necessary for this build. You could probably use something like Beacon of Yatar, maybe even Relentless Assault or Resolve. And then Near Death Experience I like because, plain and simple, it's a cheat death passive, and it's pretty necessary in this build. Before you start killing enemies, you're pretty vulnerable. But I'm not telling you anything you don't already know about Son Wuko builds. What you don't know is how it performed in my testing, which is going on in the bottom right corner of your screen. So, as I had previously done, I did the same thing. I did an hour of testing. This build, because I have such unoptimized gear, I found I was still dying on T13, so I went ahead and I dropped it to T10. Torment 10 is what I'm doing this testing on, and during that testing, in 1 hour, I was able to run 12 rifts, which is 2 less rifts than I ran with the Explosive Blast Wizard. And I went from 109 Death's Breaths to 612. So that is a gain of 503 DBs in 12 rifts. That averages out to 41.9 Death's Breaths per rift. By the way, I have my phone here. I have the numbers on my phone. So that equals out to 53 less deaths breath, or 51 less deaths breaths in the 1 hour of testing, but that was done across 2 less rifts, and basically we're gaining more DBs per rift with this setup than we did with the previous setup. But I feel like a very important thing to note is that I did find a Goblin Rift and a gelatinous goblin, the blue goblins, during this testing with Monk. So that does kind of skew the numbers because those obviously are not consistent death's breaths that you're going to be getting every single rift. But I wasn't going to redo the hour of testing, so sorry. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it. Same kind of thing as the previous build, the Explosive Blast build. You can do more than 500 death breaths per hour. With optimal gear and more Paragon, I think you can probably get pretty close to 1,000 per hour. I don't know how reliable it is. One thing that's a huge quality of life difference between this and the pushing build is that since we're not using Zalcrin's Gaze, or whatever it's called, where you're able to just cast Wave of Light anywhere on the screen. Instead, I have to actually manually aim because it just because the bell, for lack of a better term, lands on me. As you can see, all the damage is coming directly from on me, which is kind of a pain. It's not a huge deal. Again, it's just kind of a quality of life thing. But I get it. That's why the legendaries are important. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for today's video. As I did with the Explosive Blast build, I'm also going to be leaving, just FYI, we're at 36 trillion toughness right now. So that's kind of what I was talking about, that you're extremely tanky once you're up in the rift. You just have to kill a couple enemies and get the gold. I am gonna leave the rift now. But ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, this build, just like the Explosive Blast Wizard, are extremely, extremely capable speed farming builds, and I highly recommend either one. I've still got a couple more builds I'm looking to test this with. But the fact that Monk starts Season 13 with the Sun Wuko set tells me that this is going to be an extremely popular speed farming build, and that it may put Monks off to the best start this season. More information on which class I personally am starting with and what class I think everyone else should start with is coming in future videos. Stay tuned. But ladies and gentlemen, until next time, this is Primetime CP23, and I'm out.